Welcome to the Moonflower Path Podcast. This space is for the highly sensitive, the creatives, the earth-loving, the caregivers, the weirdos, the feelers, the change makers, and dreamers of the world. Here, we are all about guiding you to trust your body intuition so you can find home and shift culture. Through the exploration of somatic practice, self-care, and seasonal ritual, my hope is that you will be inspired to be in harmony with yourself and in a dance with the earth. I'm your host, Carolyn, and I'm so honored and grateful to be here with you today. Hello, Moonflower. Welcome back to the podcast. So, I'm going to be real with you. This is going to be, let's just get into it. So, I have been sitting in my closet with a cup of tea, with my laptop open, with my notes, sitting in the darkness, which usually feels really comforting, sitting on my folded up clothes on the floor, and I have rambled through a recording for like a while now, and I'm stumbling over my words and stumbling over my words and feeling foggy in my mind and thinking, well, no, like I had a plan. The plan was this episode talks about creativity. This episode is all about sharing the theme for this month in the Moonflower Path Community space, which is create. All the while, I'm sitting here feeling I have nothing to give right now. My energy is depleted. Creativity is not flowing through me right now. And thinking, well, yeah, but like, gotta stay consistent. You can't not release a podcast episode just because you're not feeling it. You're a business owner. You gotta do it. You gotta show up. And I don't really know if I have like a lesson in this fogginess to share with you, but I sure as heck want to commit to being transparent and honest with you always. And maybe this is an interesting lesson in me, somebody who does consider herself to be incredibly creative. Well, not incredibly creative, but I do consider myself to be someone who is creative. And I often have a lot of inspiration and creative energy just kind of flowing through me. But what happens when we come to a point where we're feeling like, oh my gosh, I have flowed through the creative energy and I have output a lot. And then you come to a point where you're like, I have nothing left to give. What do we do? What do we do then? Well, keep it simple. This is a lesson that Pascal Cote, who I have worked with twice now to help support me on my creative business path. She is a creative coach, and I've probably mentioned her before here in this space. She has a podcast also called Dear Creative Mind, and she has a gathering that happens where, it doesn't matter what the gathering is. You can check out her website. It's amazing. You should go. It's awesome. But where she says, how can you do the bare minimum? And that is something that I come back to often. We ask so much of ourselves. Oh my gosh, so much of ourselves. I had the first call yesterday with the founding members of the Moonflower Path Community space, and is I've never done a call like that before. I've never really done like a kickoff call for anything. I have always just taught yoga, and I put so much pressure on myself. After the call, I sobbed because I was like, oh my gosh, I've totally fucked up. People are going to cancel their membership. I suck at this. This isn't going to work. And my wife had to say, what the heck, Carolyn? It's the first day. Like, cut yourself some slack. You've never done this before. And like, yes, like I've been running the business for a couple of years. I've been teaching yoga for almost 10 years. Like, I do know what I'm doing. But there's a lot of pieces of this new chapter that are very new. And I should say that this first call was great. I chatted with quite a few folks afterwards that were really excited, that walked away from this first call feeling really good. And it's just we get in our heads, right? And right after I taught the first class in the Moonflower Path Community space, I was like, okay, okay, we're good. You know what I'm doing. But it's funny, how we're so hard on ourselves. And it is asking of me to, cut myself some slack and allow myself to be perfectly imperfect. And that's uncomfortable. Perfectionism, imposter syndrome is a real experience of moving through creativity. So I'm not really coming to you with a whole lot of here's how to, or here are all my beautiful, wise thoughts on creativity. And instead I'm just bringing you like a real life. This is what it's like to live a creative life. I just brought to the world one of the biggest creative projects I've ever moved through. And I talked about that in last week's episode, the Beltane Rituals episode, a little bit. But like it's been months and years in the making, and it's out in the world now. And what happens when you've like put the thing out into the world? You've put all of your creative energy, your creative juices into it, and you're like, holy, I need a break. What do you do then when you still have things to create, content to create, right? Oh my gosh. Create the content. Everything is content. Blah, blah, blah. Well, the ways in which I'm supporting myself these days and being compassionate towards this feeling of like, oh my gosh, just moved through a massive season, and now I find myself in this season where I'm going to be facilitating, I'm going to be teaching, but that's like, I know how to do that. That part is not new. So how can I replenish the parts of myself that are going to have to show up in the new aspects of the business, of the creative journey? How can I care for that part of myself? And the ways in which I'm doing that is cutting myself some slack, is showing up imperfectly, is turning to my creative practices. Like, I was doing some crafting yesterday and letting that be a practice in letting things be imperfect. Doing the thing anyways, even if it doesn't come out as perfect and beautiful and life-changing as you would like it to be, and instead let it just be what it is. I am letting other parts of my life kind of pause. The house is a mess. I haven't been as present with my relationships as I would usually like to be, and being compassionate with myself about that. So this is just a very real experience of, yeah, we love creativity. We're here for it. This season is the time to create. So if you're feeling like you have lots of creative ideas flowing through you, then that is so beautiful. And oh my goodness, I know what that's like, and it feels amazing. And the ways in which, in times when I've felt like that I support myself is resisting the urge to do all the things and have all the ideas pan out, and instead take note, put them in a document, take note of them so that you can come back to one and then one and then one and explore them. To let your body move your body, move that creative energy through so that it doesn't get stuck, it doesn't feel overwhelming, it doesn't begin to feel anxiety ridden. And then in times where you might be feeling like a little bit empty, creatively, I don't really like the word stuck, but it does feel a little bit like emptiness, and not emptiness in like a melodramatic way, but just like, yeah, like she's empty right now. Then what are ways that you could replenish those parts of yourself? Not for the sake of being more productive, not for the sake of being more creative, but for the sake of feeling full of love, full of care, full of compassion. How can you turn to things that feel indulgent, that feel good, that feel cozy? How can you rest? Creative folk, yes, might have a lot of energy, but it also means that we can be tired folk. I am a tired person. I nap a lot. I sleep a lot. Practice a lot of chill, very slow yoga. So how might you balance out the creative energy with rest, with slowness, with doing nothing, with being, with exploring your intuition in other more easy, maybe simpler ways? Getting curious about the phase that you might find yourself in. I was talking with my therapist a few weeks ago, and we were moving through a parts therapy conversation about how we have different parts inside of ourselves. We have like the like inner child, we have the like protective parts of ourselves, whatever. Like I'm sure that you have explored that inside of yourself, where you might have like these like different parts that show up at different times in your life or different situations. And in many mystical, religious, wise practices, we talk about how there is also like the self, like maybe it's the true self, maybe it's referred to as the higher self, or the authentic self, the aligned self, and that part of myself I often refer to that part of myself as my intuition. It's my wise self, the part of myself that knows what to say and how to act towards myself. And I tune into that part of myself when I peel back all the layers of conditioning and shit and armor. And that's how I can tune in and actually listen to that part of myself and play around with honoring that part of myself and acting from that place more and more and more, so that I can gain more and more trust in that part of myself. So anyways, I was asking my therapist, well, like how do you discern between all the different voices? How do you know which part of you is like your inner child, like whatever, that like 7-year-old that went through that traumatic experience, or that 18-year-old that went through that experience, or whatever, compared to like the true self, like the self, the I am. And she said, yeah, that's a good question. Often I've heard it be identified or described as a loving voice. It's usually a calmer voice. It's usually quite grounded. It doesn't need to scream. And it's often very curious. And I thought that was really interesting when she mentioned that, yeah, that there's a lot of curiosity in that voice, because I thought of how, yeah, that it's typically like, if we think of, if you were to be talking to a friend that's going through a really challenging moment, challenging time, and you were speaking from a place of like really grounded, really calm, really loving, and it would often come out in ways of like, well, like, tell me more about how you're feeling. How did that make you feel? Yeah, that must have been really challenging. How do you think that you want to go about this? What feels right for you, right? Like those, it's a lot of questions. It's a lot of, let's get curious about this. Let's respond accordingly, as opposed to just like use all of our conditioning to just like act out and freak out about something. And I thought how interesting that when we're playing around with intuition often thrives within curiosity, within asking it questions, and that's when it can come out. So it's like curiosity and intuition are these really beautiful companions, and they are beautiful companions within the sphere of creativity, of, instead of reacting to, maybe you're moving through a creative, like you're doing something, let's say you're like knitting, and there's a moment that's like really challenging because you're like, oh man, like I don't understand this pattern, it's super confusing, or I keep messing up. And yeah, absolutely, emotions can have a seat at the table. Getting frustrated about it is super valid. Feeling shameful about the fact that you keep making mistakes is super valid. At the same time, let's get curious about the ways in which we're reacting. Let's get curious about how we might come to a solution from a different angle. Let's get curious about the ways in which we might be putting shoulds on ourselves, expectations, unhelpful beliefs on ourselves around what this creative project is meant to look like. And is there a way that your intuition can come into this? Yeah, so what role could curiosity play in whatever phase you find yourself in? Ask yourself questions. Get curious about the emotions that are present. That curiosity will serve your intuitive self. That curiosity will serve your creative self. So even if you find yourself in times where you're not feeling very creative, let yourself become curious about what's present. So this is a very, I don't know, there's no huge point to this episode except for the fact that I wanted to offer you a gentle introduction to this month's theme. I had a plan, but instead of resisting what it is that I felt with offering myself not something that I needed, which was to force through and try and choke out a very thought out, planned out episode, and instead offering myself just a lot of grace and permission to just show up and chat with you. as I am, how I'm feeling. I'm kind of trying to take a little bit of my own medicine. So I feel like I've shared a lot of like, this is what you could do, but know that I'm not just sitting here spewing things that you should or could do if you're feeling this way, and know that like I'm in this with you too. And I will also be taking my own advice. And after I stop recording this episode, I will most likely just quickly edit it and then go and play some Disney Dreamlight Valley and make myself another cup of tea. So I wanted to end this episode with some prompts. Thank you, past self that had more energy to put these prompts together to support present self that didn't have the energy to move through the lengthier episode I had planned. So there's like 10 of them. Like really, like there's no need to, I mean, you could if you wanted to pull out your journal and you wanted to jot some things down. But these are just some prompts to get yourself thinking, get yourself, just again, coming back to that curiosity of where am I at on my creative path right now? So number 1, would you consider yourself someone who is creative? What is your relationship with creativity? How do you define creativity? How has creativity served and supported you in your life? On the flip side, how has creativity felt like a burden sometimes in your life? Would you consider creativity more something that comes from you or gives back to you? What I mean by that is, do you typically feel replenished by your creativity, where you are using creativity more as a self-care practice, a self-care tool? Or do you typically come to creativity after you feel replenished? So it's an output as opposed to an input. Or is it both? You have a relationship with both of those types of creativity. One is not better than the other. It's more just different ways to think about the role that creativity plays in your life, how it has, and does that feel right? Is that the type of role you want creativity to be playing in your life? What would it look like for you to use your own definition of creativity and carve out some time to nurture that part of you this month? What would it look like? What role does your body play in your creative self? In what ways do you use your body to create? And how might you tend to those parts of yourself this month? This month doesn't necessarily need to be, we're just creating for creative sake because Carolyn said it's creative month. This month could also be, this is a month to tend to your creative body. Just suggestions. Prompt number 8, what role does curiosity play in your life? Right? We talked a little bit about curiosity earlier. Number 9, is there one thing that you're struggling with in your life right now that you could use your curious and creative nature to lovingly address? I was listening to, I listen to a lot of things. I forget what it was. Kira the Bold, I think is her Instagram handle. And she's a confidence coach. And she was talking about how she talks with a lot of business owners that struggle, creative business owners specifically, that struggle with coming up with creative solutions to problems. Like it's a lot of like, oh, I have this issue and I don't know what to do about it. Oh, I have this roadblock and I feel like I just want to throw in the towel. And that she finds it interesting that that's the case when she then looks at like, holy crap, like you are like, look at this thing that you have painted. Look at this sweater that you knit for like 20, 30 plus hours. Like, look at these things that you have created for your business. Those same skills that you used to create that thing, you can use those same skills to help come up with creative solutions to anything in your life, and vice versa. If you are somebody who typically is pretty good at moving through challenges and problem solving, how could you use those skills when you move through maybe an uncomfortable process of creating a thing, moving through art, making art? Something to ponder on. And the last prompt, if you shed all of the shoulds around what creativity should look like, or should mean, or should say about who you are, how would that change the way you play with your creativity? I'll leave you with those. The prompts are also found in the show notes. We're also going to be talking about these different points in the community space. So if you'd love to join us, I would love to have you there. Doors are always open for you to come in, enter, peruse, and explore your sensitive, creative, and earth-loving self. Thank you for listening to this kind of strange but very authentic episode. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will connect again next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Moonflower Path podcast. I'm your host, Carolyn, and ways that you can find more support from me and this cozy community are all found in the show notes. Please consider rating, reviewing, and sharing this podcast with a friend. Those are the best ways to show your support for this free and accessible resource. Wishing you a gentle rest of your day, and I look forward to connecting again with you very soon.